and the brain. First of all, the cerebral hemispheres. Here's the corpus callosum. There's the rostrum, the genu, the body, and the splenium of the corpus callosum. The sulcus above it is the callosal sulcus. The gyrus is the cingulate gyrus, and then this sulcus here is the cingulate sulcus, and there's its marginal branch right there. So, rostrum, genu, body, splenium of corpus callosum, the callosal sulcus, the cingulate gyrus, and then the cingulate sulcus right here. And there's its marginal branch. There's some other stuff in here that we're not going to get into. Down here in the occipital lobe is important because what we have is two gyri and the sulcus that separates them. The calcarine sulcus with the lingual gyrus below, looks like a tongue, and the cuneus above. This is precuneus right here. And this right here is the occipito-parietal sulcus. That's very definitive, especially in the real brains. We'll see it when we take one out. The occipito-parietal sulcus. The calcarine sulcus intersects that sulcus, and you have the cuneus gyrus above and the lingual below. Primary visual, area 17. All right, very good. Down in the brainstem, there's the septum pellucidum, right? That separates the two lateral ventricles one from the other. There's the fornix, outflow of the hippocampus. We'll talk about that. The orange right here this pinkish is the pineal gland. There's the superior and inferior colliculi, cerebral aqueduct, third ventricle, lateral ventricles out here. There's the thalamus with the intrathalamic adhesion, or massa intermedia. Right, here's your pons, and here's your medulla. Right here is the anterior commissure, is located right about here. Doesn't show up very well in the posterior commissure. It shows up better in the brain models and in the actual real brain. So that's your median view. Of the cerebral hemispheres. The most prominent feature is the lateral sulcus right here. The lateral sulcus. The lateral sulcus divides the temporal lobe from the frontal lobe and the parietal lobe. That's the lateral sulcus. The insular gyri are on the inside of that. The insular gyri, in fact, area 41 and 42, is the superior transverse temporal gyrus of Eschel. And that's primary auditory on both sides. Area 41-42, the superior transverse temporal gyrus of Eschel in the insular lobe, the insular gyri on the inside of the temporal lobe. Let's go with the temporal lobe. We divide the temporal lobe up into a superior, a middle, and an inferior temporal gyri, separated by a superior temporal sulcus, a middle temporal sulcus, and then underneath here, an inferior temporal sulcus. The superior temporal gyrus, middle temporal gyrus, and inferior temporal gyrus separated by the superior temporal sulcus, the middle temporal sulcus, and underneath here the inferior temporal sulcus. This is the inferior frontal gyri. This is the middle. Let's go to the frontal lobe. We somewhat arbitrarily divide these up into a superior, a middle, and an inferior frontal gyri. They don't always follow that way in the real brain or in the models. Then we would have a superior frontal sulcus and an inferior frontal sulcus right here. So a superior, middle, and inferior frontal gyri, but only a superior and middle frontal sulci, because the inferior frontal is further divided up into three pars or parts. The pars orbitalis, the pars triangularis, and the pars opercularis. All right, pars orbitalis, pars triangularis, pars opercularis. The opercularis and triangularis on the left side of the brain is area 44, primary speech area, Broca's motor speech area, where all your words are stored, whether you're right or left-handed. On the left side of your brain, in the pars triangularis and pars opercularis of the inferior frontal gyrus is area 44, primary speech. Okay? To find the central sulcus coming along, there's your lateral sulcus. To find the central sulcus, you find one that starts all the way up and does not intersect. And I'm going to call it this one right here. It's farther back than you think. It divides frontal from parietal. It's one that goes all the way down but doesn't go through, and this doesn't really intersect here. It's supposed to end blindly. And that's the central sulcus. The sulcus, the gyrus in front is the precentral gyrus, area 4, primary motor. The gyrus behind the central sulcus is the postcentral gyrus, area 312, primary sensory. The lateral sulcus out, it ends in the supramarginal gyrus out here. Not very particularly good. If you follow the superior temporal out, it ends in the angular gyrus, and that shows up better on the real specimens. Follow the lateral sulcus out to the supramarginal gyrus, follow the superior temporal sulcus out to the angular gyrus. Inferior surface of the temporal lobe, this would be the inferior temporal gyrus right here, and the inferior temporal sulcus. Now there's a gyrus next to it that's kind of petering out, but it should go all the way up, and that's the occipitotemporal gyrus, and the sulcus on the inferior, or just medial to it, is the collateral sulcus. And then the parahippocampal gyrus, and its most medial extension, the uncus. So from lateral to medial, the inferior, or that's right there, would be the middle temporal sulcus, the inferior temporal gyrus, the inferior temporal sulcus. This is the occipitotemporal gyrus, and the sulcus is the collateral sulcus, and this is parahippocampal with the uncus, its most medial extension.